Hello, friends. Welcome to Anti-Chess Law. And we have a very interesting video today about etiquette, about what should and you shouldn't do when you're playing a game of whether it's chess, anti-chess, any variant. We'll be talking about things like what to do in drawn situations. Should you berserk or berserk back in a game? And when can we claim victory or not? We have a lot to discuss, and I have three very special guests, all master players. So first of all, I have usewaxlips. Hello.
Good
I
morning.
have
Good
I have
afternoon.
I have Envoy of Chaos, and I have Kellogg's.
Hi guys.
So welcome. Right, so get straight into it. When we talk about manners and etiquette, I'm going to ask this question straight off the bat. What is the one thing that is the most annoying thing to encounter when you're playing a game online?
Time burning, definitely.
Time burning. So, what is time burning? It's when you play a game and maybe you're about to lose. Maybe your opponent has mate in two or a very strong position, and you let the time just tick down, tick down, tick down. It's probably the most annoying thing in the whole game. It's actually a reportable offense now. Now, back in the day, maybe it wasn't so clear. You could get away with that sort of thing. Now it's really frowned upon behavior. Probably one of the worst things you can do. And Envoy, you were going to mention also a time when time burning is particularly offensive as well.
Common as a regular type of time burning, but there are some people who will deliberately wait until the end of a tournament in order to play the final few moves that they know of a game that they know they're going to lose, which just prevents their performance rating for that tournament from going down a bit. And it's just a special category of time burning.
And also things like trying to win the tournament if you're like 3 points ahead, and
Yeah,
there's all
yeah.
sorts of manipulation. So we hate it. Don't do it. You will get reported. We despise it. So I think we're all in agreement on that. Um, what else? There's lots of things to talk about. So one thing we'll start with is what to do when someone disconnects. And this is less of a problem these days. Now, for older players like myself, we used to have dial-up internet and people used to disconnect all the time. These days, connections are a bit more reliable, but not always, especially mine. So sometimes your opponent disconnects and it comes up this little claim victory or call draw. Now, I'm going to say almost nobody would probably call a draw when that happens. And for the one reason that it might happen to you so many times. So I feel like you're not necessarily obligated to call a draw just if someone else disconnects, but maybe there's a couple of exceptions. So, Wax, is there any exceptions to this rule?
Yeah, like I think I've done it. I have actually clicked that draw button once.
Once.
The opponent I think had a much higher rating than me, and I was a lot like, look, if I either button here I click, I'm gaining points. It's not material, and I know how frustrating it is on the other side. And I think they had they had a position that was clearly winning. So I was like, oh look, I don't want this person to hate me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I think if you really feel strongly moral about it, maybe you do, but there's no obligation, I'd say, to do it. Next, though, we have a very interesting one. And this is when you have two kings left on the board. Now, a lot of people have said, myself included, why can't king versus king be a draw? It should be. It would be in normal chess, but it's not. And there's a very interesting reason why. So I'll draw your attention. I asked this question to my friends Firebat Prime and the Unknown Guy Reborn. And Tugger responds, it's not always going to be a draw. There might be a position where it's clearly winning for one player. So let's have a look at that. Um, you can see in this position, it's White's move. And if they promote to king, then it's king versus king. But of course, next move, Black's going to win no matter what. So this is a situation where king versus king might not be a draw. So it's very unfortunate we do have that in anti-chess. Otherwise, I think nearly every time a king versus king should always be a draw. But we're going to look at a couple of examples as to two different sides. Maybe someone agrees with that, like it probably should, but do some people also try something different? So here's a recent game I just played against Finn's Love and getting down. Still have lots of time left in a 1 minute, but White's probably a much better position here, but a bit lower time. And I did consider, well, if I try to find the win, I might lose on time, but it's definitely an easy draw, I can see. But of course, I'm still very slow, so we'll see what happens as we play out some moves. And we're going to arrive at this king versus king. Now, it's interesting to note that um, Black has a lot of time, 37 seconds. I've only got 4. That is enough time to do 50 moves, but it's a pretty nasty thing maybe to do to someone to make them play this out. So Finn's being a gentleman, offers me a draw, I accept. Okay, no problem. But let's look at a different style. And we have a game with Antonis and Natkar. And the time's, much lower here too. So there's probably, and look at the time control, it's 30 seconds. Now, in this sort of instance, maybe people will think uh, you're very justified in flagging. You don't have to offer a draw. So we'll see what happens. A lot of moves played out, but it doesn't look like there's much chance in trying to win. And even king versus king, and gets the flag in typical Antinous fashion because he is a very proud player of doing that. He sees no problem ethically. All right, but let's look more in depth at this. And this is why I have my experts here. And they're going to look at 3 different examples and they're going to give their own ideas. Because while king versus king might generally always be a draw, or it should, but what about those different situations? What about fast time controls? What about 2 kings versus 2, 3 versus 3? That's what we're going to examine. So the first game, well, this is a game that Wax has played. So Wax, you want to talk us through this position and what's going on?
Yeah, so this was a game in one of Envoy of Chaos's tournaments, the Cats vs Frogs tournaments, a couple of years ago. Um, I'm pretty sure on this one, Frogs were winning by this point. Um, and I was playing a person on the Cats team. And it was getting, prior to this, like, we'd eaten down in pieces. King versus King, very clear draw. It's an incremental game. It's a casual game. Um, and you can see I offered draws. I actually offered 3 draws. And if you play it through, I ended up having to chase his king around the board because he kept refusing the draw offers. And it's like, yeah, it was immensely frustrating.
Another draw offer,
Uh, yeah, it was basically just to try and, I mean, he wasn't burning
another draw
time, to
offer.
be fair, but it's still, yeah, for the sake of a couple of seconds, like 10 seconds, you could have just accepted it.
Yeah, that's pretty frustrating. And yeah, like you said, it's not technically time burning because it's increment, but what a waste of time.
Yeah, well, and he didn't even, in this case, like, it wasn't even that much time burnt. Like, if you go back, I think it was a total of like 15 seconds or something. Like, it wasn't a huge amount of time.
Mhm.
So it's like, to what end? Like, if they'd been sitting there burning down everything, they had all 30 seconds to zero and then moving around, like, yeah, okay, at least you got something out of it. But in this case, it's like neither of us win here. Like,
So this is a
yeah.
clear situation where it's not like you can even go for a win. You can't go for a flag or barely. So yeah, it's probably a definite draw, but it's a top example. The next one we've got is Devanch and Epico. And this is crazy game because it's again 30 seconds, 2 very highly rated players with a huge amount of moves in that time. And we get down to interesting ones, king versus 3 kings. And now theoretically, Black should win this, but only with best play and a lot of time. In this position, there's no certainty. So, Kellogg's is going to take us through his thoughts on this game.
Yeah, indeed, I want to point out that this is actually a winning position for black, but it requires very specific movement, whereas you need to specifically reply to what white is playing in this case. So you don't have the time to play this out correctly and win the game as black. Um, well, I want to note that this it's a 30-second game, and here is it begs the question, all right, we play 30 seconds, we have no increments. Well, that is a game that is going to be prone to flagging. And I could argue here for white that you could definitely go for the flag since, well, in a 30-second game, time is of the essence. And given the difficulty of the position for black, black can very easily make a blunder. Defense could, call his bluff and just move forward with the king and go, let's say if all the black kings would be in these squares and for some reason, defense could possibly play King G3, for example. Well, that means that Antichess Epico needs a couple of seconds, well, maybe half a second, to move the H1 king to H2 or G2 to make it capture. But with such low on time, it's very much possible that black oversees these or just misses this and goes for a pre-move, and white can win the game. And therefore, you could argue that flagging is acceptable here.
Yeah, I think so because there's a lot of kings on the board. It's easier for white to play as well with only one piece. But yeah, and it really there's enough on the board that things could happen. It's certainly no certain draw. But as we progress, this is quite interesting. So we now get down to two kings, and of course the time's even lower. So does this change anything?
In this case it doesn't. I mean, Anti-Jazz Epico still has 7.5 seconds left against below 2 seconds left for defense. I mean,
Oh,
if
sorry,
defense survives,
Devench is white. Yeah, I think it has the
yeah,
yeah.
defense. If he's even able to survive this, well, spoilers ahead, he did. Um, it would be outrageous, And yeah, therefore, I mean, defense is probably on his edge of his seat, and he wants to, wring the victory out of it. So, and with two kings, there definitely is some possibility to make a blunder. Like maybe both the kings are on H1 and H2, and then if defense manages to get his own king on the F1 square, yeah, then it's over for black. So yeah, a defense could definitely go for that. But here, as we can see, and Epico doesn't fall for any tricks or whatsoever, and this is a clear draw. And here you could argue that, all right, Epico has the time advantage, and defense only has 0.3 seconds left. I wouldn't blame Epico if he starts flagging here, but the most amazing thing happens here, and defense manages to squeeze out a victory here by making Epico run out of time. So yeah.
Yeah, so even though we say king versus king should always be a draw, yeah, I mean the very special circumstance perhaps is hyper and there's 100 moves and there's very low time. Maybe not even enough time to actually hit the draw button or Vince it. So we can see it still goes more and more and more and more, and then finally, yeah, he gets the win on the 107th move, which is yeah, very impressive and very quick. Right, great example. And the next one. So Envoy will take us through. Now this is kind of go back a bit here. Right. So kind of got a three king versus three king situation here. Again, different again. Uh with more time, yeah, probably a certain draw. But with the no increment and low time, Envoy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. I think in general, I'm not opposed to flagging because I think the time control and playing under time pressure is a part of the game. And you've got to make trade-offs between playing slower and thinking more versus playing faster. And denying the ability to flag sort of denies the ability to capitalize off making the trade-off towards playing faster moves. But that being said, if the position is obviously going to end in a draw, playing out the draw is sort of similar to time wasting. So this position is really interesting because, as you point out, there's some time left, but it's not an enormous amount of time, and there is a bit of a discrepancy between the amount of time that both players have, which makes it not obvious whether this position would end in a draw if it were to be played out. Um, so I think it's reasonable to play out the game here,
Yeah.
especially because, as it turns out, neither player offers a draw. So sort of both people are equivalent in the sense that neither attempted to offer or decline a draw.
The other point is when it comes to offering draws, it sometimes takes time. Now I know like these
Yeah,
days the app's designed a little bit better, but the previous old app, it was very difficult to actually go in to offer a draw. It takes like seconds. So when you're playing a zero increment game, you also have that challenge too. But I think that's very well said. It's still kind of that complicated enough position where and you can see like it looks like no one's trying to win. And maybe this is their way of saying they do want to draw, but they're not doing anything
yeah,
aggressive because some people will actually have an intent to win in these positions. They will push their kings over and they will try to force some kind of result. So that's another kind of consideration.
yeah. In this sort
Um,
of position, you could try and get yourself in a position where you can invalidate your opponent's pre-move by waiting until you can get your king right next to theirs and then forcing them to take back their pre-move and make a new move, which like obviously takes away time from the opponent.
and that's it. If actually, is that a tactic? Because if someone's pre-moving and you can see they're pre-moving, could you then try for the win? Is that ethical to do?
Yeah, I personally would think that's a reasonable thing
Well,
to
if
do.
someone's trying to pre-move, then they're trying to flag as well. So yeah, I do feel like it kind of works both ways. So, and of course, as we go on, it's the same sort of thing. It's finally we get actually that was a repetition, not a 50 moves, but still a 100 move long thing. All right. So, what are the conclusions? Maybe we'll go through one by one. What have we kind of learned here? So, Ben, what do you think?
Look, I think whether it's reasonable to flag or not, or conversely whether one morally should offer a draw comes down to the amount of time left on the clock. Obviously, a situation like this, black has enough time there to offer a draw. White has enough time to receive, to accept the draw. Um, in situations like this, sometimes if there is very minimal time, like say sub 1 second, like often I'll just start moving my piece back and forth and flapping it, like effectively signaling to the other person, like, hey, neither of us have time to hit the button. You just do the
Mm,
same
mm,
thing.
mm, mm, mm.
We'll pre-move this out. Um, but yeah, absolutely. Like if it's a very high stakes situation, I think we've chatted offline about this where I've been going for norms, for example, and it's like, look, I really need the win to get this. But having said that, like when that's happened, I've apologized in the chat afterwards. I said like, look, this is what's going on. Really, really sorry. Um,
See that's already very nice. You even take it upon yourself to apologize. So there is
well,
some
yeah,
morality there too. It's
signaling that, yeah, like in a normal situation, I don't think, it's kind of a dick move, to do it. But certainly when there's a lot of seconds on the clock, yeah, I don't think so. If it's
there you
low,
go. So that's exactly the kind of opinion we're after. Yeah, like that's what we think. Sean, would you agree with that or disagree on any point?
Yeah, I think I'd probably agree with that. I think if one person, if either one or both players can reasonably expect to win the game, were it to play out, I think that's something they're completely entitled to do. But if it's completely obvious the position is going to be a draw, then playing it out, it's sort of there's no point to it.
Yeah.
And it can be sort of similar to time wasting. Although if neither player offers a draw, sort of neither player can be blamed for not taking the draw.
Yep. And Richard, anything to add?
Yeah, I think there are a couple more factors which I myself would decide if I would offer a draw. Um, for instance, if you have the Shield Arena, which is 3+2, and then your opponent starts to Zerg, and you have this drawn position where I myself am at 1 minute 30, and my opponent is at 4 seconds, and the position is a draw, but given I have increment and he doesn't, he decided to Zerg. He thinks I am too weak to win the game, and he thought he could do it in half the time and without increment. Yeah, I'm not gonna, give a. Not gonna reward that behavior.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
then,
and I would claim the victory as my own by flagging in this case.
yeah, and I think that's the exact situation I had against Devanch a couple of weeks back because he berserked, I flagged him, and he whinged and complained about it. And I said, well, man, you berserked, and it's one king versus four. No. So that prompted this very discussion about when to do that, which actually perfect because it leads us on to our last point, about berserking. Now, there are some people who love to berserk all the time. Maybe they berserk just about every game. That's great. But should you be encouraged to berserk back if someone does? Now, some people actually think maybe there's some kind of code, and some people actually commented. So I've look, I've blocked out the person's name. It's not really important who it is, but it's about this attitude. They said in the tournament chat, "Oh, like you violated the Zerk for Zerk rule. You should have berserked back against me." And the other guy's like, well, no. Why should I have to do that? You're the one that took the berserk. Why should I have to do it back? And really, like the concluding statement is, why should we zerk back when we don't want to? So, your thoughts on that, guys? Berserk? Yes or no? What do we think?
Yeah,
I
I think I agree with the summary of that, the conclusion.
Hmm.
Yeah, when you Zerk, you're playing a different time control to the time control you originally signed up for, and there's no reason people should be obligated to play that shorter time control if that's not the time control they want to play. I think also, um, if you have something like this, there's a problem of like rating. If you're a 2000, you probably wouldn't expect a 1500 to Zerk back against you. But sort of where do you draw the line? Like, do 1900s have to draw Zerk back against you? Do only people who are stronger than you have to Zerk back against you?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a good answer to that. If you want to say that there is some threshold at which people have to Zerk back.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think there's probably no need for sort of further discussion. It's a choice. And, it's the reason you play time controls that you want. If some people don't even like fast time controls, that you should never be made to berserk unless they want. So I think that settles that pretty well. Any final thoughts? So there was actually a couple of final little things to talk about. What about arrogance with openings? Now, there are some lost openings in Ante, like playing D3 as the first move. And some people have actually said, oh, I can't believe you would be so disrespectful to play D3 against me. Now, I personally think that's ridiculous. D3 is a lost opening. If you don't know it, that's too bad. But your thoughts? I think let's hear from Envoy first because I know he's plays D3 a bit.
Yes, I have played D3 a bit. Not everyone that you would expect to know how to counter D3 actually knows. I've definitely beaten a number of opponents significantly stronger than myself with D3. But also, if the opponent doesn't choose to play the winning line against D3, D3 actually just makes for some interesting gameplay that you don't normally get. And that's certainly something that some like strong players choose to do. They don't choose to play the winning line because they just want to play that game, and I think that's something we should be allowed to do if that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Now
I have
that,
to,
yeah,
if
Richard.
I can comment on that, I played, I mean, it was, I believe, 2 years ago in the LAWC, and it was against BW Mtone, and he played D3 twice against me, and he played an intermediate halfway through the capture sequence where there is a very specific move of, I believe it's, bishop to eighth. No, it's bishop
H3.
H3. I
Yeah,
believe you have
I
to
know.
play that.
Yep.
And I didn't know it. I hadn't seen it, and I fell for it twice. And I think that's perfect legitimate reasons to play D3, even in a tournament matter when there's some honor to be claimed. It's part of the game, mind games. I am when I get paired against people for the LAWC, I start to play some mind games, in the Discord, and I can become on the very brink of disrespectful
Yep.
behavior, but just to get into someone's head. And therefore D3 is a very powerful opening, because if you look up the database and you see that there are certain variations in D3 which they haven't played, I'd say go for it.
So I love that when you're talking about the gray area and the fine lines because, we want a fair competition. And one of the rules is if you're forbidden to, you know, on purpose annoy or distract an opponent. You shouldn't trash talk them or make them feel uncomfortable. But there's a gray area of psychology like that. Well, you can maybe do some things to just sort of disrupt some people's concentration in a very subtle way, as long as it's not obvious. Uh, that's a whole new interesting point. And there was one time, I'll finish on this story. I was at a chess tournament and there was a young boy and he was kind of crying because his mother wouldn't buy him a chocolate frog. And so he kind of sat down against his game, against this old guy, and he was starting to beat the old guy. Then the old guy comes back in a minute, gets out a chocolate frog, and starts eating the chocolate frog. The boy like burst into tears, lost the game in 3 more minutes. Now, is that
That's
I'm all for it. I'm all for
that
it.
is yeah, I'm very torn on that. That is amazing, but also holy shit.
it's one of those things that's not against the rules, but what a bastard. So how much do you want to
Yeah,
win? Look, play
yeah,
the game fairly, play the game, as you said it should be played. We can't accommodate everyone. Some people are going to take offense no matter what. Just don't, intentionally piss people off, but we're always going to get these funny gray areas and fine lines. So enjoy the game, and that's probably where we'll leave it. So for our video on etiquette. So thank you very much once more to my guests, usewaxlips, Envoy of Chaos, and Kellogzz.
Thank you.
awesome. Yeah, having
All
us.
Thank
right.
you.
And thank you again from Anti-Chess Law. We'll see you in the next video.